Welcome to this episode of Tech Threads. I'm your host, Max Watson, and today we are talking about women in tech with Stephanie Jerome, who is a product manager at Akoya. Stephanie, welcome to Tech Threads. I'm glad I could have you on tonight.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Excited to chat about my experiences.
We have a really awesome episode for those who are tuning in. Stephanie has some really cool experiences and her perspective on product management, women in tech, and just kind of her story going from her, previous professional role as like marketing and sales to product management, kind of what comes with that. But Stephanie, before we jump into it, could you just kind of give like a brief overview of who you are, what you do, and kind of your story?
Yeah, so I'm Stephanie Jerome. I'm based here in Utah. I work for a Massachusetts-based company. I'm currently in the fintech space, and previously I was in the edtech space. And I'm a product manager more on the platform side of things, but I'm dabbling in customer-centric things that will roll out for go-to-market.
Awesome. Because I know I looked on your LinkedIn before we hopped on, and you have a really cool journey coming from marketing to, product management. Could you kind of explain that path that you went on?
Yeah, so my first tech company, I didn't really even know what it was. So I worked for Jive Communications. They've been acquired by LogMe, and so it was a hosted voice over IP company. And I was working at a magazine, Utah Stories magazine, and it was a really fun job. I did design, I did editing, copy editing. I was also doing sales. I was selling the ad space to local businesses, and I did pretty much everything there. But I wasn't making a lot of money, and I needed a more stable means of providing for myself. And so I found this job on like Indeed or something, and I just applied for it, and it was for a marketing position. And I ended up landing it, and it was a really cool company because it was about 500 people. It was like in a very rapid growth stage, and that's really where I learned a lot about tech as a foundation. Because working in the marketing space, I had a little bit of exposure to everybody. So I worked with product managers, I worked with sales operations, I worked with the folks in marketing, creating the advertisements and the campaigns. And so I started looking into like MarTech stuff because that was my background. I got a degree in communications and a minor in marketing. So yeah, that's kind of how I landed at Jive Communications. But really, the reason that I got hired was because the CMO took a chance on me. So as I was thinking about how I excelled in tech, it was really because of men that were sponsoring me and elevating me and trusting that I could do the work. And that's really important, I think, for people to recognize is that women can lift other women up in tech, but really it takes a partnership between men and women to make it all work.
I also had you on because I know that you are a big proponent of women in tech and kind of an advocate for them. Could you explain some of like the unique challenges that you have seen or heard of in the space of women in tech and kind of how you, deal with those and adjust to those and help people understand those?
Yeah, I'm living it. Being a woman in tech is an uphill battle. I will just say that. So you need to be really brave and strong if you want to be a woman in tech. We need more women. So I don't want to deter anybody from trying to pivot away from a different career path. But I'll just speak to a few of the things that I've experienced personally and the things that I've seen. So one thing is the gender pay gap. So I've personally experienced times in my career where I have the same level of experience or more experience than a male counterpart, and they've been paid more than I have. So what I would recommend for that particular challenge is don't be afraid to talk about pay, because if you don't talk about it, you won't know if you're making less than someone else. And don't be afraid to talk to your boss about it. Another thing that I have experienced personally is something called the motherhood penalty. Have you
Mhm.
heard of that before?
I haven't heard those exact words, but I've heard of the idea, the underlying idea of it. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So as I was getting into product management, I actually had just had a baby. Um, And so I had all of these career milestones that I went through. I moved from sales operations into a more technical role. And then I wanted to go into product management. And so I had that goal. And I noticed that when I came back from my parental leave, that I was not getting as many opportunities. People were kind of ignoring me. I was trying to prove my value when I came back from my parental leave because it's not like I left the workforce, but it felt like I was being left out of a lot of things. And
Right.
that's essentially the motherhood penalty is that women are considered less valuable after they have a child in the workforce. And then on the flip side of that, men are considered more valuable. So if a man has a baby and they come back to work, they're typically given a promotion or they're typically given a raise. But women are considered less able to show up. Um, and so I would just encourage any managers out there to try to flip the script. And if you're considering a woman that's returning from her parental leave as someone that's less valuable, think of it in terms of what I believe that about a man coming back. Because that woman is likely just as capable, she's just as eager to show up and do her best. So that's that's another thing that is a big struggle is the motherhood penalty. But I would say for anybody that's considering having a baby, don't be afraid. It'll work out. But I would also encourage you to talk to your employer about the parental leave policy because a lot of times the parental leave policies are very bare minimum. And if you don't advocate for something that works for you, you're not going to get it.
Right.
So those are a few things. And then the last thing that I would just say is that staying in tech is really difficult because of some of these things, because there's not a lot of flexibility. But I think the biggest issue is gender discrimination. So there's all sorts of gender discrimination that happens, but I think the most important thing for men and women is to recognize that it's important to listen and that women have valuable opinions and we have good ideas. And so the gender discrimination that I've experienced and I've witnessed is, mostly around women being treated like they're not as serious as of professionals. Even though they are experts in their field, they have lots of training, they have lots of education. So just make sure that you're listening to those voices in the room, the female voices. And for the men out there, there's this thing where you can actually advocate for the women in the room and spotlight them and call them out because sometimes we're not as loud. And so just watch yourself as you're in a meeting with the women that you work with and make sure that you're not leaving them out.
Right. And you said so many amazing points. I'm sure we'll bounce back and forth between a lot of these points, but do you
Yeah.
have any advice kind of talking about that last point? Do you have any advice on how like managers or coworkers can help, overcome these challenges that you just mentioned?
I would say just educate yourself. There's lots of really great books out there. Um, so there's the Feminist Fight Club. I know feminism and feminist, the word feminist, sometimes people they get worried about that word. It almost feels like a swear word to some people. But really, the idea of feminism is that it's an equal partnership between men and women. And women and men have different strengths, and we try to complement each other and lift each other up. So, the Feminist Fight Club, it kind of has a template for how men can help women and women can help women. So, I would recommend that book, but there's lots of other really great resources out there. Um, and just ask the women that you work with how they want to be supported because it's unique to everybody. Some women might need more time off. Other women might want more responsibility. It's really up to the individual to kind of curate their own experience. So that's what I would recommend is educate yourself, find resources, but also don't be afraid to talk to the women about what they need.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point too, because I mean, like every person is different. Every person's needs might be different. So just having those conversations, I mean, can alleviate a lot of like the struggling or hurt or pain that is being felt. Do you have any advice? Because I know a lot of like, even with just like normal like annual reviews or like other things where you have these kind of sort of more challenging, difficult conversations, possibly. Do you have any advice on how someone can facilitate those conversations and kind of invite those conversations so that these, multiple parties can kind of communicate better together?
Yeah, actually this year there was an engineer that I kind of became close to because he was on my team. He was within my product experience team. And he was noticing a lot of the gender discrimination that was happening at my workplace. And he just approached me and he said, "Hey, like, how can I help you?" So I think even just coming to the table with that kind of a question, it's really powerful. I think recognizing that you don't have all the answers and you might be able to help is a really good starting point. So just have an open dialogue. If you're a manager, if you're a coworker, if you're another woman, I think rallying with the women at your organization is also really powerful. You might not have like a formal employee resource group for women or a mentorship program or anything like that, but you can start your own. Usually that's how these kinds of things start is women experiencing certain things and they want to feel like they have commonality with someone else. And then you just reach out to another woman and you start talking about it, and then you create more of a safe space for yourself.
Right. Just finding like-minded people and kind of building that community. Do you have any advice for maybe someone out there who might feel like they don't have this community or this kind of resource group that you're talking about on how they can find people like that or kind of build a better community around that?
Yeah, for women in product particularly, there's a lot of different organizations here in Utah. So I'll just speak to some of those. There's the Women Tech Council, which is a great organization. The thing that I love about the Women Tech Council is that they're reaching out to women that are in every stage of life throughout their tech career. So they're reaching out to young girls and they're trying to get them interested in STEM, which is a really great thing because how do you keep women in tech unless you start educating the younger generation? So they have a lot of free events. There's lots of networking opportunities. You don't have to be a woman in tech. You can be an aspiring woman in tech to attend those events. Another one that I would suggest is Women in Product. Again, you don't have to be a woman in product. You can be an aspiring woman in product. And then the last one that I'll mention for Utah in particular is the Tech Moms group. And so that's another really great place to start because they teach coding, they teach you about how to do sales in tech, they teach you about all sorts of different crafts within tech because you don't have to be someone that knows how to code to be a woman in tech. Um, but yeah, so those are a few organizations that I would recommend. And you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll help you find more women to connect with because I'm really well connected. So don't be afraid to reach out. Just start talking to people on your LinkedIn, start talking to people out here in in your community, wherever you might be. There's usually women's organizations that will connect you with other women. So don't be afraid to go outside your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I'll definitely tag you on LinkedIn in this. So if people watching this would like to connect, they can definitely find you as easy as possible rather than have to like search through all of LinkedIn to find you. Um, you mentioned earlier talking about how like it's hard for women to stay in tech. Can you explain more about that and kind of your perspective on that?
Yeah, so I think women who stay in tech have to be really resilient because at the end of the day, most women are the default parents. And so the workday doesn't exactly line up with child care centers, work hours. It also doesn't line up with elementary school, regular schools. If you're a woman that has a young child at home, you are the default parent. So if your job is not offering a lot of flexibility, a lot of women will drop out of tech because they have to take care of their kids because they're the default parent. So, what I would suggest for overcoming that, again, I'm going to encourage employers to flip the script and think about offering flexibility because the man might be the default parent, right? If the dad was the default parent, but they were a really great employee, you would want to help them to do their best work, right? And so women that have children, they typically want to lean in, but they need a little bit of flexibility for the hours that they work. And I think employers are starting to understand that, but we have a long ways to go in that respect. Um, yeah, so that's one reason is women that have children, but another reason again is the gender discrimination. Sometimes it's so bad that you don't want to put up with it anymore, and so women just drop out. Um, and then the pay gap, again, it's a lot of these things where culturally we have not treated women as well as men, unfortunately. And so a lot of women will say, well, I'm not feeling respected in this space, and I'm just going to leave. I'm going to find another space that will respect me. And I have to give mad props to women that do that. Like everybody has their own reasons for leaving, but the retention rate is pretty low. Most women leave tech around the age of 30.
Wow. Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, these are just such like tough things, especially like with the parenting and to balancing of time between work and family. Like I was just in college and I feel like my time was split a month with a ton of things. Like, cause I have a wife, I'm married, so like hanging out with her and then like school. And then I also played basketball. So like giving the appropriate time to that as well to make sure I'm on top of that. Like it was so challenging to get all of those things combined. So I can only imagine having, a family as well or kids and have to line up, schedules and schooling and all these activities with work can be really difficult. Do you have, advice for people out there who might feel like they're swamped down or have, such super busy lives on how they can kind of manage that? Or I mean, ways to get through that, I guess.
Yeah, just one thing that I would mention is that some of the most kick-ass engineering directors that I've worked with have been women. And that's because they know how to multitask. They know how to balance complex schedules. They know how to do conflict resolution because they're moms.
Yeah.
So I think for women that have a lot going on, um, there's this concept of work-life integration. I don't think there's such a thing as work-life because our lives are integrated between what happens in our personal after hours life and what happens during the daytime. So don't think of it as two separate things, is what I say. Just make sure that you're able to take care of yourself first and foremost, and then you can show up for the people in the room. In my career, burnout has been something that has happened every so often. And if I'm reaching the point of burnout, I'm not good for anybody, right? Um,
Mhm.
so don't be afraid to ask for help is
Yeah.
what I make sure that you're getting help, whether it's professional help, seeking treatment through like a psychiatrist, psychologist. If you need more family support, make sure you're voicing the things that you need. If you need help from your employer, make sure you're talking through that as well. Don't don't feel like you have to do it all on your own. And hopefully you have a good partner too, because it again, it's a partnership with the division of labor between the husband and wife, and it's never going to be 50-50. It's never going to be 50-50. Sometimes you're at 20% and your partner's at 70%, but you try to meet in the middle, right? Um, so I would just say don't be afraid again to voice that you might need some help because burnout is real and you're
Mhm.
not good. You're not good to anybody if you're burnt out. So take care of yourself first and foremost.
Right. Do you have any advice for people who do get burnt out? Because I know that burnout is like a really big thing. I remember like in my college days, like studying for tests, you have like five like chemistry tests or something like that, and you can really feel like burnt out. Do you have any advice on how to like avoid burnout or what you've done when you do kind of feel like you need a boost or are kind of a little bit burnt out from, just everything?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is to check in with yourself. Um, when you reach the point of burnout, it's almost too late, right? So I think what's most important is preserving your energy and spending it where it serves you the most. Um, so with burnout, It's a holistic thing, right? It's mental, physical, spiritual. It's like a holistic issue. So, depending on what's bringing up your reserves and what's bringing down your reserves, you kind of need to do that check-in with yourself and see how you can bring your battery back up, whether that means you go out for a hike or if you read a book or if you need to just have a day where you do nothing. Um, but burnout, it really does drag everything down. It puts everything into a tailspin. So,
Hmm.
like I said, it's more about managing the little things along the way and not getting to the point of burnout. So once you get to the point of burnout, it's almost like you need someone to lift you out of the out of the drowning mode, right? You're going to throw a life preserver over to you. So yeah, I would just say if you are getting to the point of burnout, slow down, check in with yourself, and make sure that you're taking care of you.
Right. We just even had that like the discussion at work because we have a production or a product rollout in a week and a half. And so that next week after that is like we're going to be working some crazy hours, working a lot. And we even talked about this whole idea of like you don't want to get to the burnout and then have the burnout happen and then you're kind of like scrambling to fix it and then get back to like what you're doing and get kind of in that groove again. It's more about realizing when you're kind of ramping up towards that and then cutting it off before you get there. And we do like team walks is one of the things we do just to like get out, get fresh air. They're gonna like set up for production, like cornhole games, like snacks. So you can just go down and like hang out for a second to kind of like detox, get your mind away from the screen, let your brain kind of recalibrate before you dive back into these problems that we're working on. So I think that's really good advice. And I've seen it work with me, especially like in work when you're really facing like tight deadlines or really challenging things. Just like taking a step away before you kind of hit that climax of like, like the boat's already under the water. Like there's nothing we can do to fix it and kind of, reassuring yourself on that. I know we're kind of coming. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say the work will always be there. So
Mhm.
just remember that it's work and it will always be there. But your mental health, your physical health, if you're not taking care of yourself, it's bad news bears. So,
Yeah, I know. And I've even read some books that just talk about how much more productive you are when you do like take little breaks or
oh
like
yeah,
take these little checks. You would think like stepping away is like losing productivity, like some people might want to believe, but it's even the opposite. Like I feel so much more, creative and willing to solve problems once you kind of have that break and then come back into it.
1,000%. Yep.
I know we're kind of coming up on time because I don't want to turn this into like a 3 hour, Joe Rogan podcast. But do you have any last advice for women out there who want to kind of follow your path, get into tech or get into product management? And do you have any like things you learned along your path that could help them out?
Yeah, so I got into product management because men were helping me. And that's because men typically get promoted into management. So the hiring managers were men. My mentors were typically men. I had some really great female mentors that I absolutely love and adore. But I would say find somebody that can sponsor you, someone that can sit in the room with you and say, Stephanie's really great, or so and so is really great. And then that will help you get in front of other hiring managers and people that might be interested in you. So you need women to help you, but you also need men to help you. That's, I'm just gonna keep emphasizing that. You can't do it alone.
Right. It's a team thing. And even like the sponsorship, finding people to help you and mentor you and kind of pull your name into the hat when, discussions are happening. That's a huge thing. And I hope the people listening to the podcast today kind of learned a lot about how, everyone can, like kind of like you said, join together, help everyone grow at the same time and just create really awesome environments that everyone can thrive, everyone can grow, and everyone can, unleash their full potential and help the teams in their own unique ways. I know on LinkedIn you have the saying, I don't want to butcher it, something like let can do you know what I'm talking about? The kind of the sparkles. I've seen that quote a couple
Yeah.
times on your LinkedIn.
Don't forget your sparkle.
don't forget your sparkle. It's kind of your unique, personal taste to everything because everyone has something to contribute. And I've seen on all the projects, when you have all those diverse different groups of skills and subsets and cultures and backgrounds, that's when you can really create something awesome that kind of fits with everybody. But Stephanie, I just wanted to thank you again for taking the time to hop on tonight. This episode was great, and I hope a lot of people find value from this. And we might have to do this again.
Yeah, thanks.